Thank you. Good afternoon. This is a title that Mark came up with, and it's called Living in the Danger Zone. Obviously there, it's just one of many chapters in the ongoing saga of Valerie and Mark Sigler. Mark and I go back quite a long time ago. You know, I was born here in Oakland, but moved to the Kansas City area back in about '63, just in time for JFK and the Beatles. And Mark and I fell into one another's company as we entered high school, and really became very, very, very good friends right from the get-go. Almost inseparable. We even had some time in Hollywood High School in our sophomore year, but we actually found our way back into the Kansas City area in order to graduate. Mark's father owned a dental lab called Myron Dental Labs in Kansas City, and I oftentimes worked there with Mark and worked on teeth models. So Mark eventually decided that he wanted to join his father to a certain extent in the dental business, but eventually he cashed out and decided that he and Val would move on down to the Pensacola Beach area where they were going to live, off of his funds from having sold his portion of his family business to his brothers. So when they got down there, they learned very, very quickly, though, that you've got problems down there that you didn't have in Kansas, and very, very quickly, as they started to engage Mother Nature, they decided that it was time to either come up with a means of dealing with it or get out of town. So they approached FEMA, because FEMA had been in the habit of constantly shelling out public funds to those who had lost their houses, conventional houses, time and time again. And in doing so, the funds would go back into reconstructing the houses in their former conventional manner, and that didn't seem to make much sense to Mark. So they actually got an approved loan, grant as it was, from FEMA, in the amount of $250,000, and he took this money and he decided to put it to good use. Mark, using his background in terms of fashioning and modeling in the dental industry, and applied it in an appropriate manner to something that he knew nothing about. He was not trained as an architect. He'd never built a home. And he started to engage those professionals that he needed to have in order to be able to make this thing work. So they wanted to build something that was going to last. Most houses are conventional, they give them a 50-year lifespan. But he said, why not try to do something for 7 generations or so? So he came up with the notion, self-imposed, of 150 years. Got to be water resistant if you're living near the ocean, and that's what the hurricanes use to cause much of their damage beyond the wind. Should involve a lot of cutting edge materials, and it should be beautiful. That's a subjective term, but they decided that they had some taste. So they explored various technologies, and they came up with the notion of the airform monolithic dome, which was done by the Souths down in Texas, and they found some architect formerly of this area, Jonathan Zimmerman. He's no longer alive, rest his soul, and Bob Bissett, who was assisted Jonathan in his endeavors with Hobbit-like types of domes, which appealed to Mark because they looked aesthetic as opposed to industrialized storage containers or hemispheres that you see in the landscape. He knew that the dome was both hydro and aerodynamic, and that was the thing that really appealed to his sense of appropriateness. So biomimicry, just looking around, obviously there are seashells, there are any number of things that have smooth shape to them, which have evolved over time to resist various aspects of the physical environment. These are some of the pictures that you're familiar with, seashells, and obviously, sea creatures. The professionals were assembled. We have the visionary Mark, not a professional. We have his wife, Val, who is the one who is in charge of maintaining the integrity of the budget associated with the FEMA grant. We had the architect, Jonathan Zimmerman, who was actually the guy doing the serious sketches, assisted ably by Bob Bissett. One of America's 100 best painters. He's been awarded as such. He was trained as an architect at Washington U, summa cum laude, after having flown in the Air Force in Vietnam. He did not want to be an architect, but he had no problem dealing with Jonathan Zimmerman and the challenges of the aesthetic world. Dr. Arnold Wilson, an esteemed expert with respect to thin shell form. The Souths fabricating the airform, and this is what happened. You see on the upper left here, you see the 17 piles actually of piers that they used in order to claw this thing into the sand. The form of the ring support seen in the lower left-hand corner, and the balloon in an inflated capacity. Here is what it is before it's inflated. And then on the beaches is the interior, as they're shooting the interior of the balloon form with a polyurethane, attaching clips in order to be able to attach what turned out to be about 5 miles of rebar, and then the shot blasting, more like a shotcrete, in order to be able to build up this composite. Insulation on the outside, mass on the interior was served to be a very, very good heat sink with a very, very good tempering element. These are just some elements out of the South's book on monolithic dome, which shows precisely what we've seen in situ. These are after the fact computational analysis by Dr. Habib Sadid, formerly of the Idaho State University Structural Department, wind tunnel analysis. That's the dome as it appeared in about 2004. In its finished capacity, you see the trees aren't even sprouting, and they never really got a chance to get any foliage because of the activity. And there was a lot of activity that occurred, as we know, from 2000 onward, hurricane-wise. These are just some of the architectural sketch. It shows the first floor. The first floor was placed at 21 feet above sea level. That is so that the surge that would come from the hurricane would actually go under the house, bust away the garage doors, and allow the first habitable level to be more or less isolated from the ravages of the storm. That small diagram to the right is the master bedroom area that's on top. We've got 120 tons of concrete on the first floor, 80 tons in the second, and the overall shell 180. So you can do the math. It's a lot of concrete. Entering off stage, we got it. There's Ivan. Category 4 hurricane, wind speeds of 135 to 155. When it land fell, 135 miles per hour. So without further ado, we got a little clip from the Weather Channel here of the actual activity.
You build something up, the storm tears it down, you build it back. The storm tears it down, you build it back.
Frustrated by the cycle of destruction, Mark designs a home that he believes will withstand a hurricane. With Ivan making landfall, it is about to face its first test.
They're being told to leave right now.
Meanwhile, hurricane veteran Kerry Sanders has come to Pensacola Beach to report on the storm for
Fresh
NBC.
from Iraq.
To encourage the residents who may have remained behind here on Pensacola Beach, they have shut the water off to this area so that anybody who's trying to take a shower or turn their water on will get the hint. There's no reason to remain behind.
The word from New York, here's this house that can withstand a hurricane. I'm like, a house that can withstand a hurricane? So we go over there and we mark. And so Mark said, well, if you guys want to ride the hurricane out with us, we're on a barrier island. So it's a real roll of the dice, but we're kind of like, what do you think? Kind of look at all each other and go, okay, we'll ride it out there.
By afternoon, the winds pick up to a howling 75 miles an hour. But inside the dome, the TV crew experiences a calm they never thought possible during a hurricane.
We were doing pretty good, and then about 7 o'clock, one of the newsmen, he handed me his cell phone. He said, this call's for you. I said, hello? And the guy on the other end was the head weatherman down at the Hurricane Center in Miami. You can understand that? And he said, you have to get those guys out of your house. You're all going to die in 70-foot waves. I thought, oh my God, I've killed myself and these newsmen on national TV.
Then Mark gets a call from a panicked weatherman in Miami. He warns them that towering waves are on their way and urges Mark to evacuate before the dome home is destroyed.
Well, I told him, I said, we can't go anywhere. They closed the bridge 6 hours ago. And he said, oh, no. At that point, I could hear the panic in his voice, and I did become pretty alarmed. He said, the storm surge at your house should top out between 20 and 25 feet.
You've got 135-mile-an-hour winds outside. It's raining so hard sideways that you literally can't see more than 3 feet out that door. It's absolutely amazing. We can literally hear huge chunks of other houses bouncing off of this house.
Now, I got to say, this is something that I never expected, and that is that I'd be able to lay my head on a pillow
and go to
The
sleep.
surge was hitting the bottom of the first level, knocking the granite free from the countertops. That's the
Mark
pounding.
Sigler and the news crew get
There
their
we go.
first look at the
Houses
devastation
picked up
around
over
them.
pilings and
It was like
moved.
kids on Christmas morning, you know, what's out there, what's out there. And as the sun came up more and more and you could see the extent of the devastation, everybody just got
Rebuilt.
quieter and quieter, because when you really saw what happened outside, we realized how lucky we were to be alive.
The beach houses that were built on the ground level were just gone. They were just wiped away. No sign they'd ever been there.
The news crew records the first images of the destruction on Pensacola Beach. Now, the news team has to get their footage on the air. With roads impassable, it falls to producer A.J. Goodwin to walk through the wreckage to the mainland. Roads have disappeared under the sand. Remnants of houses litter A.J.'s path. The entire landscape has been ravaged.
It was just all sort of washed around and washed away. There was a marina up there, and the boat.
Evening, her footage is broadcast, giving the nation its first look at the devastation of Pensacola Beach.
Been to war zones. This was worse than a war zone. It was just flattened.
Mark Sigler's dome home survives, but his neighbors' homes have been swept out to sea.
I realized at that time that it was going to take years for the beach to recover, although the dome did pretty good, the infrastructure.
So, reconstruction, they knew it, they planned for it. Those stairs that you saw torn away were meant to tear away. The garage doors were meant to be blown away so that the water could move under the house. Just much as seashells at the bottom, you know, of a seafloor, water moves around without rolling them. Okay, so there was a lot of publicity. They had a website. They were getting 60,000 hits a month after the hurricane. Mark starts to respond to that. He says, what can we do? People are asking us, can we do this? Well, as you see here, Dr. Arnold Wilson put the house on the cover of his book, you know, which is a treatise on practical design for thin shell concrete structures. And it made the 2003 RSC special publication for construction in the hurricane resistant zone. Still the code. These are some of the things we came up. This is called Skybird. This is a biomimicry sort of response to some inquiries from HGTV. They wanted to do a pilot, and they wanted to feature what we were working on now, so we came up with this.
But new technology now exists that can make living in coastal regions far safer in the future. This unusual building was created for Mark Sigler, who's lived through 9 major hurricanes.
I've been here 15 years. Literally every home on the front row has been replaced because of hurricanes. There's not one original structure left 15 years ago.
Can we move on from this one? I think that we got the gist. We can just move on perhaps to the next slide. Are we okay? All right.
Will disrupt the community for 8 to 10 years. Katrina, they figured it'll take 25 years to get back to where they were before. So the need for strengthening building codes and homes is of dire importance with the amount of storms that we're having in the United States.
These are some of the ideas that we played with. This was a merge, 3-dome sort of a situation. We got a call from somebody who had a gaming facility in the hurricane zone, and they thought that perhaps a resort, you know, could come out of this. These are just some of the views, some models that we worked with. We got another call from somebody up in the North Dakota region. They wanted to do an artist cultural center, and we came up with a notion. They wanted to phase each one of these things, so we had independent domes. We even had this funny little thing, which was literally a, you know, derivation of a bird. And so we had to deal with some of the concerns that you see here: economic, climate change, poverty, and population. These are things that are very, very pressing issues to us all. And so it more or less got us thinking in another direction. As you can see here, One of the things that we came across was lost technologies. We noticed that there was a lot of concrete that's been around for 5,000 years. Well, what about that technology? What were they doing? They weren't doing it the way we do it today. Why is it lasting so long? There's a Dr. Joseph Davidovich who's in France who has actually reverse analyzed some of the concretes, and he finds out it was agglomerated stone made with local materials and aggregates. We're wondering, why isn't that being used today? Ed Masria with this 2030 challenge has just been advised by the National Overrated Concrete Association that they've agreed to take on the 2030 challenge and reduce the amount of CO2 in the production of concrete to 50% by the time we get to 2030. That's not 100% as he wants, but it's a move in the right direction. We're thinking about employing, more appropriate sorts of technology in areas where, you don't necessarily need to fend off from a hurricane, but you do have a situation where if we can actually figure out a way, factory produced or even on site, and using, technologies we have available to us, obviously in seismic areas, these things are very, very stiff. We have, in one design, spring pilings that actually reduce the actual shaking from a seismic force, coupled with a rigid building. Generally that's bad because it cracks, but you see that we've got so much in this. And then so this is some of the stuff that you see in terms of smaller, tri-merged sorts of things that might be incorporated elsewhere in the world to address the needs of housing, refugee housing. And as you can see, it's a generative mode. Sustainability is key in our minds. That particular sort of village that you saw there has carports that have checkout cars that you can actually, log into your phone and reserve. You've got PV on the circulating carports. It's another one where you just gained a couple of things together. This is a nice slide that I saw that maybe I'll use in closing. This is from Dr. Adam Neiman. He's got the Earth with the relative volume of water and the relative volume of atmosphere. Okay, we've got to take care of it. We've got to figure out ways to do it. We can do it. Thank you very much. We'll close with this.
It's dramatic, it's daring, and it's downright disaster-proof. And in building one of the biggest, baddest domes ever attempted. And laugh off, this bold bubble concept is called the Skybird. Once it's built, it will be 50% larger than the Sigler's Dome home in Florida and pack a ton of amenities into its 8,000 square foot interior.
Well, thank you for that about it.
Sounds like one heck of a forest hideaway. But if this builders aren't taking any chances, they're spending big bucks to build a dome home that they're sure can take a serious beating.
And the foundation, so that earthquake seismic activity will reduce this.
And in case the forest around it goes up in flames, the Skybird will come tricked out with fire-resistant glass, a retardant exterior coating, and even a cutting-edge smoke filtration system. When it comes to extreme designs, Mark Sigler is definitely a visionary, but he isn't an architect. So he called on an old friend who'll help make his Skybird concept a reality.
Right, fantasy. Keep going off on something that's too far out there.
Mark and Dante designed a dome home that pushes the envelope both inside and out.
Gonna have dual master suites, 4 additional bedrooms, a large commercial kitchen. It's going to have a huge garage area that's a multi-function area so that you can set it up any way you want.
Well, son of everything. So all things considered, what kind of money are we talking here?
This one's going to cost probably $1.
When the Skybird soars in 2009, the Siglers hope it will inspire a new generation of home builders to think outside the box.
Our hope for these homes in 200 or 300 years, the way that the forest looks after it is closed in around this house, and this house has become part of the forest, to me that...
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, okay? These are some of the technologies that are available to us: Hempcrete, geopolymer concrete, balsa, steel reinforcing, extremely appropriate materials to be used. Thank you.